Hey folks, John with Complete Technology Solutions, your friend in the computer business. I have a good one today, guys. We were wandering around in one of the booths out here at the flea market, and one of the vendors had something that kind of looked antique-y but wasn't really antique-y, and it sort of gave me a really interesting idea. So today we're going to do another one of our Let's Bake a Pie episodes. But what are we going to bake it into? Well, hang tight and I'll show you in just a second. Here we go. Okay, folks, so here's the deal. When I found this, I thought to myself, well, this is kind of neat in itself. But then it occurred to me, you know, a lot of you guys that have come by have actually seen my custom game systems that we 3D print. And I thought this will be an interesting thing to do. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to bake a pie into this grandfather clock. Now, I know what you're thinking. We're going to put a pie in a clock. What a concept, right? First of all, let me let you know. And I'm going to get Stumpy re-angled here so you can kind of see this. This is a cool little clock. It is by no means a super antique. It is actually electric. It's not mechanical. As you can see by the old brown wire coming out of the back. We all remember these. But it's a neat little clock. And I thought to myself, well, we've got room in the base. It looks really neat. It's in relatively good shape. So let's take it apart and let's put a raspberry in it and make this a fully functioning game machine. Sound like a pretty cool idea, right? Well, hang tight one second. We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, guys, so the first thing we're going to go ahead and do here is, as you can see, we've got a little piece of glass that is actually out. It's not really glass, it's just plexiglass, though. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up cleaning this plexiglass off and reusing it because it's in pretty good shape. The top piece is actually in, and it's solid. It's got a little crack in there, but I don't care too much about that. It's going to add to the flavor of it, if you will. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this face down, and we're going to pull the back off of this. I'm going to try to keep Stumpy aimed at this so you can see what we're seeing in here, because I honestly have no idea what we're about to run into. Once we get this apart, we are going to need a few things for this conversion. Obviously, we're going to need a raspberry, so we're going to go ahead and go with the B3 Plus again. I was going to go ahead and go with a 4 on this, but 4s do have overheating problems at this point. And since this is, even though I'm going to cool it in some way, completely enclosed, I thought that might not be the wisest idea. So we are going to go with a 3. We're going to go ahead and we're going to need to get a way to get the HDMI signal out of here without knocking, you know, another cable out of the back of this. Ideally, I want nothing but one power cable coming out of the back of this. So I've got an external HDMI cable, so it's going to go HDMI from the Raspberry to an external port on the back of the clock somewhere. We'll figure that one out. And then it occurred to me that we're going to go ahead and we're going to mount a one of the remotes inside of it. The actual controller for the wireless remote we're going to put inside the clock on the Raspberry. However, people might want to play 2 players, so we need an external port to put a secondary USB to access it. So we've got an external USB port. So we're going to add this one on too. And then it occurred to me I don't want anything else flopping out of the back of this thing, so one cable is all we want. But a Raspberry, as you know, has to be powered and unpowered. If we wire the power into this with a stepper motor to step it down to 5 volts, what's going to happen is you're going to have to unplug the clock to unplug the Raspberry, and we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is, I thought to myself, well, I want to put a switch on this so that the switch will just control the Raspberry. But I want it somewhat authentic to the fact that this is old school looking, right? So we don't want to put, you know, some new pressure switch or something. So check this out. I went through my little junk pile and I found this old school toggle switch. And I thought to myself, what a great way to turn a Raspberry on. So we're going to actually wire it up to this toggle switch. The next thing we're going to need to do is to figure out how to power all of this internally. Now, like I said, I don't want multiple cables coming out of the back of this. So here's what I had in mind. This is one of those old school 70s looking brown style cables. We've all seen these before. It occurred to me that I could wire everything internally here if we had some sort of a plug that resembled this old brown cable. Well, as fortune would have it, once again digging through it, and everybody in the audience has seen one of these brown cables with the multi-adapters on the end of it for the multiple plugs. Well, this looks an awful lot like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this cable back through. We're going to wire this inside this case, and this power cable is all that's going to be coming out of the back. One cable, toggle switch to turn the Raspberry on and off, and the clock will be running whether it's on or off. That ought to be pretty cool, right? So it occurred to me the first thing we probably ought to find out is, does the clock work? Kind of nice thing to know. So, as I don't know, let's go ahead. We're going to stand it up here. I'm going to put Stumpy and angle it on the clock, and let's see what happens if I plug this in. We're just going to give it power and see if we get any motion whatsoever out of the clock. All right, so I have the clock plugged in now. And look at that. We actually have motion out of the clock. Now, I don't know whether it keeps time or not. In fact, the fact that it worked is really surprising. Frankly, I wouldn't have cared if it worked because it still would have made a cool case. But it does work, which just adds a lot to it. That's fantastic. So that means we're going to be real careful with it. And so, all right, so let's go ahead and unplug this. Next step we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look in the back here. So let's go ahead and lay it down. And we're going to pull out these 6 screws. I'm going to have Stumpy focus down in here. And as you can see, we've got 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. And those are flat tip screws, excuse me. So hang tight one sec. All right. I tell you guys, once again, they're not a sponsor of mine, but trusty iFixit kit. Man, I tell you, the other day I was fixing a guy had brought in a handheld game system. And it had those little triangle bits on it. You know what I'm talking about, those little proprietary triangle things. And sure enough, I went to that iFixit kit, and it had those bits. I was very pleasantly surprised. So if you don't have one, they're definitely worth the money. I know they're a little expensive, but they don't break. They always work, and it's pretty much got every bit you're going to run into. So, all right, let's see what little treasures this case holds here. Now, I want to try to avoid desoldering or messing with the connections on the clock as much as possible since we know that it functions. All right, so let's take our screws that we do not want to lose for sure. And we'll place them over here on our iFixit kit. All right, let's take this back off. This looks like one of those typical old cardboard. Oh, yeah. Very basic electric mechanism. Oh, okay. I'm going to show you guys this. So, when they wired this up originally, as you can see, here's the power wire, and it is literally just twisted on with these 2 screws. That makes this so much easier. Although, what I am going to do is I think we're going to run our power cable out the bottom instead of out the top, which will make things a lot smoother too. Now, one thing that's I'm noticing right off the bat is this red coloring right here is the backing of the clock. That's what's being seen. So, our Raspberry is going to have to mount down here. It's going to have to mount pretty darn low. And based on where those screws are, that's our line. So right in this area is where we're going to end up being. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So let's lay this out a little bit and kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. Either that or we can either go low or high with it. Either way would be fine. I'm thinking low would be better. So let's put this here. Let's just take our Raspberry out and kind of mock this up. I'm thinking we will mount it just like that on the back side. And that will be perfect. Actually, that won't be visible. We'll still have some room for some cable management over here. And we'll run our power cable out the bottom and out this slot right here. So actually, that'll work really well. All right, so to get started, let's go ahead. We're going to get this existing power cable out so that we can work on this. All right, since they were nice enough to thumb screw this, we will just unthumb screw it. There we go. All right. Now, one thing I'm noticing on this right away, guys, is this the cable that I'm holding here, there is no polarity that I can see on the cable. So what we want to do is we want to mark which one was the positive and which one was the negative. This was our negative, and obviously you've got a, we're going to put the negative up here and put a little loop in it. That way we will make sure we don't reverse polarity. I'm not sure what would happen. Probably either the clock wouldn't run or it'd run backwards. So, okay, now we're going to go ahead and pull this one through. There we go. And we're going to keep that negative. There we go. Okay, so this is our negative cable. Oh, got to go on through here. and maintaining our negative. All right, this is our negative cable. All right, now, one other thing we should probably go ahead and do early is let's get the Pi prepped, and I'll tell you why. Since it's going to be mounted in here, there's not going to be any direct access to the SD card. So we're going to need to go ahead and mount our operating system in here before we put it in here. Otherwise, we're going to have to take it all apart again. So we don't want to have to do that. So I'm going to get that prepped. Be right back with you. Okay, guys, so what we've got is I've got the Raspberry here, and I've got it, as you can see, I've got it all, I've got the fans on it, the heat sinks, got heat sink on the back. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small spacer back here because I don't like this sitting flat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount that just a little bit higher than the center and right about there. That's what we're looking at. That should allow us to get this HDMI cable down and around here because it could loop up a little teeny bit over the edge of the clock and be visible from the front. Not a lot, and certainly not enough to make it, a problem. But we want to try to keep that as limited as we can. So, all right, let me go ahead. We're going to get this mounted, and I'll be right back with you. Hang tight. Okay, so as you can see what we've got here, this is actually the inside, and I had actually thought about, this has got a crack right here. I had thought about possibly flipping this around and using this as the inside since it's nice and smooth, but then it occurred to me if I do that, I'm going to have to re-drill this hole, and we didn't want to actually have to re-drill that hole. So that's why we didn't end up going that route, and I did put it right back where it was. But as you can see, the Raspberry is now firmly mounted. It's actually screwed in on all four sides. It's spacered out, so there's room underneath it, and we didn't go back through the back, which is what was really important here. So, all right, our next step is we're going to go ahead and figure out how we're going to get the wiring set up for this, where we're going to run the HDMI cable and where we're going to run the secondary USB cable for the controller. So let's take a look at that. All right, it's looking like, based on the room that we've got, our power cable is going to come through here. That'll be fine, which, by the way, we're going to use a standard. We're not actually going to use a switched power supply because we're going to end up wiring it into this switch, the toggle switch, so we're not going to do that. But I think what we're going to do is we will run this. Let's put our HDMI, and I'm going to draw this out so we can kind of see what we're looking at here. All right, ideally, we'll put our HDMI cable right here. That'll still be low enough to where it won't be visible from the back of the clock. And I'm going to draw this out. Now, these cables are going to be a little longer than we want, but we're going to try to do some creative cable management down here in the base because we do have a nice wide area to work with. Okay, so we're going to do HDMI for this one. And then we'll put the serial port just below it. That's what I'm thinking. Or excuse me, the USB port. All right, we'll try to line them up nicely. There we go. Draw this out. All right, there we go. And this is going to be our USB. Okay, so what we're going to do is we need to go ahead and cut these holes out of here and then try to square them off and make them look as nice as possible. So hang tight 1 second. I'm going to knock these out. I'll be right back with you. Hey guys, so what we've got going here, I want to kind of give you a rundown. I know you've been watching Stumpy and I've sped up the video quite a bit. We've got our two cables. This is our HDMI and our external USB. And I've got two ports cut into the back here, and I've got them solidly secured in here. And what we're going to go ahead and do, also, I went ahead and I inserted our system disk right here. That's going to be our operating system. Pretty good point to do that because once this is in, you're going to have to take the whole thing apart again in order to put in another disk. So that's a good thing. All right, so the next thing that occurred to me, that the way this back was, now this is exactly the way it was when we first picked it up. It's got this crack in it right here. Now, I had considered flipping it over and using the other side, but the problem is then the hole that is drilled for the adjustment on the clock would be on the wrong side, and I'd have to drill another hole. But it occurred to me that this clock has got a real nice brown finish, so what I thought was I'd take this black piece of felt, and as you can see, it's outlined right here. All I'd have to do is cut the outline of this, and then hot glue it down, and this would be the background that you'd see behind the clock. It'd look really, really pretty. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So hang tight. I'm going to show you what we got in mind. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. I had to move the Raspberry up a little bit. You guys might have noticed on Stumpy here, just because it had to be able to clear the bottom where these bottom screws are because of the way this is, and I really didn't want to have to cut into this. The other thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put the felt on here. Hang on a second. So what I'm thinking is we can put the felt over this and cover it, but something else occurred to me just now, as a matter of fact. The way this clock base is shaped is intriguing. There's a lot of space under here to conceal stuff, and I wouldn't have to worry about anything showing on the inside of the clock. So I kind of made like a last-minute decision here to go ahead and change the design a little bit. So this shows you how these projects can kind of go off on a tangent if you make decisions in the middle of them. And you guys all remember this when we did the Vicberry. I planned out one thing, but we ended up changing up a couple things, and it worked out perfectly. So what I'm going to do is, let me explain. This is going to stay here. We want to have these connections right where they are because it's perfectly sight right on the back of the computer or the clock. Also, we're going to mount the switch right here on the back of the clock since we already have a hole here. What I'm going to do is we're going to take the Raspberry, though, and I'm going to move this out of the way. Now, we are still going to felt this to make it look good. And what I'm going to do is, on the bottom of the clock here, you got all this space. I'm going to mount the Raspberry right here with spacers under it. And then what's going to happen is the HDMI cable is going to come up here and then loop back into the clock through the same hole that the power cable is going to come out of. That's actually going to solve a whole lot of problems. Number one, the mounting of the Raspberry, how to conceal it well. It's going to give them access to these other USB ports if they need them in the future. That's one of the big things that really kind of caught my eye on this. And it's a lot easier to mount like this. So hang tight one second. I'm going to show you what we're going to do. We're going to mount this right here, and then we'll be right back with you. Okay, so what we've done with the Raspberry, and I'm going to show Stumpy here. As you can see, I've got it mounted on the bottom now, and it's actually very, very solid on the bottom. And then what I did is I have a hole notched out right here, so the HDMI cable comes up and goes back into the case. The USB cable actually goes in through the same hole, and the power cable will actually come back through the same hole up into here. Now that solves a lot of problems. Number one, and I'll show you this primarily, when you open this up, it leaves this whole area right here for cable concealment because we still have to deal with that power cable, so let's not forget that. The other thing we've got to do, and I had mentioned that before, is this glass. We've got to go ahead and get this cleaned up and glued back into place before we get too carried away. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now that we've got the Raspberry mounted. We've got this ready to go. We're going to refelt this here shortly, but I'm going to go ahead and get this glass in. So hang tight one second. You can watch what we got going. Okay guys, so I'm going to show Stumpy what we've got going here. What I did is I took the original glass and I placed it back into place here, as you can see. The pins were actually broken off that held this in place originally with those little pressure clips. So what I did is I went ahead and I placed it in place and I used 4 drops of hot glue. And it looks like that's going to hold just fine and not be visible from the front. So that should be just fine for what we've got going. All right, the next thing we're going to work on is we're going to go ahead and get the power squared away. So I'm going to see if I can get Stumpy aimed here, and I'll show you what we got going for that. All right, so I'm going to try to get Stumpy positioned here so you can see what I'm actually looking at in here. What I want to do, we've got these 2 leads. Remember, this is the negative and this is the positive. We've got the original power cable right here. Obviously, we're not going to need this much because of the way we're going to wire this in the box. So I am going to take this power cable. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect this back up the way it was originally. Okay, so negative to negative and positive to positive. So hold on one second here. And we're going to go ahead and use their screws. We're not actually going to do any funky soldering because this is like really short and really old cabling. So I certainly don't want to risk having any accidents or destroying any cables here. So hold that thought. Okay, we're going to screw that back together. And we're going to get our little thumb screw here and screw her in. There we go. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing for the positive side. Excuse that. I know that my wrist is in the way of Stumpy there. Kind of hard to do this when you're dealing with these little teeny components. So we'll get her back focused here in just a second and show you what we got going. All right, so those are back together now. So as Stumpy can see, we got our positive and our negative wired back in here. Now what we want to do is I want to run this cable internally, but invisibly, down to the bottom here. That's the goal. So we're going to go ahead and use our hot glue gun, since we've already got it all heated up and ready to go. And we're going to run this cable right along the glass here. Going to put a couple blotches there And this could take a second to set. That's what we're shooting for here. Give it a blotch there, hold there. There we go, one here. And one down here. Now I know this is going to take a couple minutes to set, guys, so what I'm going to do is hold this in place for a second, and we'll be right back with you and show you what it looks like when it's all dry. Hang on. Okay, guys, so as you can see what we've got going here, I'm going to get stumpy. We've got the power cable, and I've got it hot glued on the inside all the way down. Now, this is where it gets kind of cool. You know, I tried this a second ago to see what it looked like. I cannot believe it actually worked. Check this out. So this is one of the 3-amp power supplies for a Raspberry, okay? We've all seen these. Now, this one does not have a switch on it, which is exactly what I wanted, because we don't want a switch on this. We're going to wire one in, okay? So what I did is I thought, all right, we're going to put everything on this power cable and have only this cable coming out the back, remember? So in order to do that, we had to plug this in, and I'm going to show you this, along with the other cable. And it still had to be fit into the base here where it couldn't be seen. Well, that's a pretty big block, right? I mean, there's no doubt that that's a large power block. So I went ahead and I plugged in the power block here, okay? And I went ahead and I plugged in our clock right here. All right, so now we have power to both at this point, all right? And then what I did is I went ahead and I set it down into our case. And as you can see, and I'm going to get stumpy on here because I actually could not believe this actually fit this well. Hold on a second. When you run it down there, it actually fits perfectly in place, just like that. And it's exactly the level it needs to be to close the case. It's almost like this was built for it. So, hang on one second. Once this, I'm going to give this glue another second or so to dry because we definitely don't want to try to do this while that's hot. Hang on one second. Okay, guys, so now that we've got the power block in here, as you can see, and I'm going to try to back stump you off to give you kind of a wider view of this. What we've got here is we've got the power block in here. The clock is connected. We're all cable tied in here nicely. The cable coming out of the back is the power, and that's all we're going to have coming out the back there. And this is the power for the Raspberry. Now, what we need to do is trim off the negative terminal, and we're going to have to run the negative terminal over to the switch. Now, it can be either the positive or the negative. It doesn't really matter. In this case, I'm going to go with the negative, and then we're going to put the switch into the back here. So hang on one second. I'll show you what we got going. Okay, guys, so I'm going to try to let Stumpy see what I got in mind here. I'm going to aim her down here. Okay, what I'm going to do is we're going to trim this cable. And now we could break both ends of this. I really would like to try to avoid doing that. I want to trim this off and split this cable if I can, without actually exposing both sides. That way we don't have to double wrap them. There we go. So you see now we got two nice clean. This one's actually the negative we're going to be going to anyway, and we've got a break there, so that's good. All right. And what we want to do is based on where we want to mount our switch, which is going to be about right there, and you can see that over there. Stumpy, you can't see it, but you can see it over here. This should be about all the clearance that we're going to need for that. So we're going to go ahead and cut our wire here. And we're going to go ahead and strip both ends, and we're going to solder it to this switch, which I've got the old handy guy holding down there for me. Hold on one second. And for those that are wondering, a lot of this particular project was fly by the seat of your pants here, because there was no manuals for this, needless to say. The inside of this clock ended up being a little tighter than I expected, even though it looks like there's a lot of room. It's pretty tight. But it did afford us a lot of places to hide and conceal things, which was pretty important to this project. So that's a big plus to it. All right, so. All right, solder gun's heating up. Let's go ahead and get this one soldered up, and we'll be right back with you. Hang tight. All right, guys, so here we go. So we got all of our cabling in here. This is the only one that's coming out of the back now is the power. So we're going to run everything else back up in here. And I'm going to try to keep it all together as we seal this down. So I'm going to be real careful that we don't have any cables exposed above the line where the pendulum is, because we don't want any of this stuff seen back here. The only cable that's going to protrude a bit is the HDMI cable for obvious reasons, and probably the power cable. So we're going to bring them back in here. Hang on one sec. I'm going to change my angle. All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and screw this back together. Against my better judgment, I'm going to go ahead and use the original screws that came in this thing. So hold on just one second here. You know I'm a big hater of these old flat screws, but you know what? I figured we modified the rest of this so much we ought to keep a little bit of its originality, and those screws, unfortunately, are original. So we're going to go ahead and put those in. Now, I will tell you guys as I'm doing this, I would probably not have done a conversion like this had this been like some sort of highly valuable antique or something made out of wood. But this is made out of plastic. It's probably something in the 70s, I would imagine, so not super, super valuable. The cool thing is that you would never know there was a computer built into this, assuming we did this correctly. And I haven't even turned this over yet, so we're going to see if we did it correctly here in just a minute. So hold on one sec. Let's get these screws in, and we will see what it looks like. All right, guys, so as you can see from the back here, we've got our HDMI, we've got our USB, we've got our power. Now, this is actually a toggle switch up and down, Raspberry on or off, but the power is constantly running in off of our plug so that our clock should work. So let's point Stumpy at the clock here for a second, and let's plug this thing in and just see if anything blows up or smokes. I can tell you, and you can probably see from Stumpy, we got no visible cables coming up. So right now, there's no way to know what we did. So let's take a look, see if it comes on. All right, so, and there's our clock movement. Okay, so while that's running, let's go ahead and we'll run our HDMI cable. Hang on one second here. And you guys are seeing this over here. It's working great. I'm going to turn this toward the camera so you guys can see if the clock still runs after we do this. And Stumpy can see what we're doing with our cables here. Hold on. All right, we're going to go our HDMI cable right there. And we'll go ahead and plug in our controller. Now, this is the standard controller we use now. There is enough room under this to have plugged this into the Raspberry and had it completely concealed as well. And in fact, that may be what I do before this goes up for sale, which, by the way, it will be in the shop. So if you guys want to see it, come on by. All right. All right, so we've got that in. Now I'm going to switch the position on Stumpy here. I wanted to do this live so you guys can see this happen with me here. And what we're going to do is we're going to show our faithful, trusty old TV here. There we go. And in theory, what we should be able to do, once we hit this switch, is get the image to come up. Now, a lot of you guys have actually seen the image that I have built for this. It's one I've been working on for quite a while, but I think it's by far the best one I've made so far. So, all right. In theory, we're going to hit the toggle switch. I'm going to show you guys. Toggle switch up. That should turn on the Raspberry. Watch the screen. And here we go. All right, guys, no matter how you cut it, we still have a working clock. We have a functioning game machine built into an old school clock. By the way, that felt looks wonderful. I am so glad we did that. That looks so much better than even I thought it might. So check that out. Now let's let this go on in here for a second. And we'll take a look at, maybe we'll play a game for a second just to celebrate. What do you think? A good idea. All right, guys, here we are. Brand new image, so we have to calibrate our controller, which we're going to go ahead and do real quick. And if any of you guys ever want to know anything about how I've got the controllers calibrated, the image I'm using, or if you just want me to make a video on how to set up RetroPie someday, let me know. We'll do a whole video on that. Now you guys are watching, so I'm assuming that the clock is still running there. All right, how about we play, let's see here. You know what, I'm in the mood for some Galaga. Let's play some Galaga. Hang on a second here. As you can see, there's no shortage of games on this image. So let's go down here. Oh, you know what? I got a better idea. Let's play some Mortal Kombat. That's my game. Now, as any of you guys know, or anybody that knows me knows, I always play the same two characters on Mortal Kombat, no matter what version. We're going to play the original arcade version now. Hold on a second. Turn that volume down so we're not blowing you guys out here. All right. I like I'm always a Scorpion guy or a Liu Kang. Always have been. So, here we go. So, let's go with some Scorpion action. All right. And hopefully Stumpy's getting a good shot of this. I think he is. Yes, he is. Make sure he's getting a good shot. All right. Oh, look at her. She's going to try to come up and get me. Yeah, let's do one of these. Come on. Okay, we've had it. No more from her. See, she thought she had me, so that's a good win. See what I get for not paying attention? Let's see what we can do now. Now let's play it correctly, shall we? Oh, she's being all kinds of clever today, isn't she? But not clever enough. All right, let's see if we can do one more here. Clock still running up there, guys? I hope so. I figure that way, you know, you can play the game and see how long you've been playing at the same time you're getting a kick out of it. Actually, the reason I did this is because not just because I wanted to see if I could. I had a lady the other day that apparently has a bunch of antiques in her house, and she wanted to get a system for her kids. Down, down, up, down. No, can't remember that. But she didn't want to mess with the antique aesthetic in her house. So I figured this would be the exact perfect thing for that kind of thing, right? Pretty cool. Yes, indeed. And we'll shut her down. Now, the cool thing is, based on how we have this wired up, there is actually a hole in the back here. Theoretically, I could wire an LED to this, too, on the back to show when the Raspberry's on. Because, as most people know, though your TV will show no signal, your Raspberry stays on until you remove power. And that's by flicking the switch down. So, all right. Hey, guys. This has been cool. This has got to definitely be one of my favorite that we've done so far. Ran into challenges we didn't expect. That's the fun thing about these projects. I really love doing this. If you want to see this thing live, I will have it in my booth. It's actually going to be hooked up over there to my gaming systems for people to take a look at. It is really, really cool. So come down and take a look at it. Once again, thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. I know it ran a little longer than normal, but I think it was worth it because it certainly shows you what can happen, the strange things that'll come up in the middle of a project and force you to redesign everything. The key is not to be afraid of it. If you want to do something, jump in and do it. That's the key. Thanks again, guys, for watching. Hey, don't forget, hit that like and subscribe down there. Spread the videos. Tell your friends about them. I'm getting a lot of people that are coming into me just saying, hey, I never heard of you, but man, I love this stuff. So let them know about me. I'd really appreciate that. Other than that, we've got the Patreon running as well. I appreciate it. Anybody want to help me out with that? That'd be great. I've got something really cool planned next week. Big, really cool. Really going to have to build it out there on the floor. I probably won't be able to fit it back here. So stay tuned for that one. That video will be coming up here in the next week or so. Have a great week, and thanks again for watching. See you later.